I'm Annie Brooke, and I'm here to talk about one of my favorite subjects, which is play. And I can tell you, with my over 35 years experience as a therapist, as a business consultant, and helping families, it matters. People who don't know the quality of improvisational play can get stuck in power struggles. They can get stuck in not having the improvisational ability to let go of control and to actually put on your wide elephant ears and listen to the hidden stories and difficult behavior. So I'm a big proponent of learning the skills in play. And I can tell you that my nervous system, I grew up playing, and then I had lots of trauma, different things. I had to relearn how to play. And play is important. So that's what we're going to do today. Hi, Ellen, welcome. And so as people are arriving, one of the things I always say, whenever you're arriving, what you want to do is really let yourself arrive in your body, because play comes from in your body. And I'm going to guide you in some ideas and some actual experiences that are in my ebook, and it's a hard copy as well, Awakening the Creative Mind. So my play, where I really learned to play, was in my studies of improvisation. I learned as a child, but then I had to almost relearn as an adult, because we get serious about life and we need a certain kind of seriousness to function, of course. But if you're a therapist, if you're a parent, if you're in a partnership, even with yourself, knowing how to play matters. So Ellen, please let me know if you have any questions about playing, or what your experience is, or why you came on the webinar. I want to say hello. Hi.
Hi, my name is Ellen Sophia. I'm not sure how I stumbled on your Instagram account, but it was literally yesterday, I think. And then I saw this and I was like, wow, that's really, I'm really interested. I'm really curious. Yeah, and I suppose the short version of that is that I did well, in my early teens, I did improv and drama and absolutely loved it. Mm-hmm. And it's a long story, but I've been sort of on the chase to rediscover that sense kind of inside of myself. And I also really, really believe that it's what's missing for so many of us right now. Like, this has been a quest of mine for probably the last maybe 10 years, but it feels like it's really something that the entire world needs at the moment, right? And I'm really, I read a little bit on your pages. I was looking on the website now, and yeah, there's so much I could say about it, but I'm really, it really landed with me, like how, and I didn't have a lot of time to read all of it, but like how you talked about play being sort of an antidote to freeze.
Yes.
Yes. About that, yeah.
Oh, good. Well, I'm glad you're on the quest. I'm glad you're here. And that quest is the worthwhile quest I hope everyone listening gets excited about. And one of the things, do you say your name is Ellen or Elaine?
Ellen.
Ellen, okay. So yes. What Ellen's bringing up is how much we need it now. And people are focused a lot on suffering, on being politically correct, on changing culture. That's important, but how you do it, if you do it through blame and pointing the finger and pointing at the suffering, the spirit inside us, it could go into guilt or it could go into remorse, but it doesn't go into compassionate action. Nobody goes into compassionate action when they feel blamed. They go into guilt or they just push back. And so
That's true.
how can you use play even in your advocacy for change, for social change? So let's
Mhm.
talk a little bit about the components of play. It really is full body mind. And I remember when I was studying in my mid 20s, I was so fortunate. I studied improvisational movement and I studied with Ruth Zipporah, who is a wonderful elder who developed action theater. And one of the things Ruth did to get us to be improvisational in our bodies is she had to get us out of our heads, out of trying to do something funny or trying to make something happen. And so she would just hit a wooden drum for 20 minutes every class, and you had four things you could do. You could walk, you could turn, you could stop, or you could run. Now, I can tell you, my brain went nuts. After a few minutes of just being able to do that, it wanted to turn when she didn't say turn, or to run when we were supposed to stop. And I've used this exercise a lot in my training, even when I train therapists, because I want therapists to be creative. Because in your therapy treatment, it's not going to be textbook, it's going to be real people. And if you can't improvise and be present with real people and what's happening in their lives, you're going to be trying to textbook treat them and they won't want to come back.
Mm.
And I get lots of, people love my work and I'm full to the max. And I'm training therapists to get as many people able to use the skill sets of really deep embodiment. And so the first embodiment is get the brain out of the way. Now, this is an exercise. We probably won't do it here, but if you have a friend, have them do it with you for 20 minutes. One of you is the one just giving the structure. Because what you're doing to the brain is you're saying, I have the structure and you can't do anything but that. And so you're doing it, right, with all your rebellious nature coming up, right? Your rebellious nature will come up, your collapse will come up, your sneaky power will come up. And the whole time you are just walking, turn now, walk, and she won't vary the pulse, but she'll vary the instruction. You might walk, stop, walk, turn, or you might walk and walk and walk some more, right? And you're going, oh my God. And the brain is losing its ability just to stay in the field. The improvisational field, or I guess improvisation and play, is about engaging the field of your experience. So in improvisational ensemble, you have to be able to sense what the other people are doing. You have to know what's happening in the space. You have to have peripheral vision so that you're not narrowed in and trying to analyze. And all of these things help you get out of a freeze response. A freeze response is often an alarm and orient. And then sometimes people are frozen, so their spine is not communicating. Let's do a little neuroscience for a moment. Primitive reflexes is the alphabet of movement that babies are learning. They are born with bodies that have reflexive responses to stimulation. And then an example is when you touch a baby's hand, they're going to grab your finger. That's called a primitive reflex. Or you touch their foot, they're going to pull their leg back. And you want that because for safety. I worked in Africa and I remember seeing this whole tribe of monkeys around a tree, and the mother monkey sounded the alarm, wah! And all the babies went, wah! Like a startle. And then they grabbed onto the mothers and the mothers ran away. Now, a primitive reflex is the startle. And if that weren't in the body, the infant would get disoriented and not grab the mama. So that's why, babies have reflexes like pull away from a hot stove. These do not go up to the brain for thought. They are what's called a spinal arc. So they travel from sensation to response directly across the spine. And that's why if someone's in a freeze response, I will often use, well, I'll use play for sure, but I'll also use primitive reflexes to interrupt the freeze, to get the body back through the brainstem into reflexive movement. What play is the ability to make choices on the moment. You know, how do you engage a child in your office who is showing you something and you're not quite sure what it is? It might be reactive behavior. It might be them being mad at you. How do you turn that into play? Or how do you not personalize it and try to get them to behave? You want to be able to give children limits, but you don't want to be punitive. And how you do that is you engage them in a manner that is responsive. And with children, if your parents out there, please download my free PDF called 1, 2, 3 Magic. Because in my 35 years of work with families and children and infants, many parents don't know how to give a limit to a child until they're already mad. They're already frustrated, and then they give a punitive kind of limit, or I told you so, or they lose it themselves. That's not playful for the parent. It hurts their nervous system. And parents can get overwhelmed, especially if you're one parent with 3 kids. Come on now, that's not fair, but it happens all the time. So what you want to do is know how to have, it's not lot. I get so excited. I have so many things I want to share. It's not that you're being impulsive as the parent. It's that you're actually grounded and you're making very skillful choices in the moment, but you're not doing it from a part of your brain that is exhausting. You're doing it from your creative imagination and your playful self. So often I have kids in my office, I don't bribe them to do things. That's another problem. I see parents bribing their kids to do something. That's not a good strategy. Your kid will, that, you know, basically you're giving them the power of the relationship. They want to know that you're powerful, that you can keep them safe when it's dangerous, that you can actually contain them if they get out of control. They're learning to feel their own body and to regulate. And these are very, very important skill sets for a child to have. They're also learning you're not a pushover. So when they go to school, they're not going to abuse the teacher just to see, right? They'll already know that there's a kind of behavior that is helpful for a learning environment. And if that's what parenting is, it's a big learning environment with kids. And you're learning as a parent. So learn the skills of play. Download 1, 2, 3 Magic, learn the skills of limits before you're exhausted. You give the kid a structure that they can follow. And they know that actually behavior does have consequences. That is the reality check for children. Oh, my behavior has consequences. And my real prayer, really, to parents is to do this with your kids. You can start around the age of 3.5 or 4, so that by the time they get to public school, the teacher isn't having to do it. The teacher can teach, but we don't give our kids limits and teach them this skill. And then they get to public school and it's on the teacher's back. That's not fair to the teachers. They need to be able to educate and not be in charge of discipline. And so learning, having children who learn limits matter and behavior has consequences, not mean consequences, not punitive, but it has consequences. All of this relates to play because as a parent, you're going to be on your toes when your kids start to escalate. You're going to have to know how to change it up, redirect the energy, get those 3 kids into the room where they're allowed to wrestle and play, right? Give them something to move their body. So it really is, play is the deepest somatic embodiment. And it involves being able to have the improvisational choice ability. But the first thing it takes is relaxing when there's a little bit of chaos. You know, when we're in the structure of walk, stop, turn, what's happening is you're trying to create a little chaos. I don't want to walk. Oh, just like a kid. No, I think I'll see what the teacher does if I stop when she says run. Right? I'm testing. The brain is doing all that stuff. But you know that you're there for your own learning about improvisation. So hopefully you don't cheat, right? Or if you do, you notice that you cheated and the instructor says, okay, we're going to stop. Now let's talk about why are we cheating? What's going on with the brain? Well, what's going on is the brain is trying to hold on to some kind of control. Control is not improvisation. Improvisation is choices, but it's not trying to control the field. And you can believe it, when you feel controlled by others, you'll go to a part of your brain that gets angry and resistive. Yeah. Or when you feel scared, you'll go to a part of your brain that tries to control others. It doesn't work because we lose the co-creative solution, the co-creative problem solving, because one person doesn't have all the answers, but the intelligence of the situation probably does. If you can keep the field, how do I say this? It's as if each person has to have their sacredness within the field. A child has to know you're not a bully parent.
Yeah.
They have, yeah, right? They have to know you're not a pushover parent. That'll scare them, or they'll get what I call sneaky power. And then they'll use it a lot, and they'll use it in school, and they'll use it in their adult relationships. We don't want sneaky power. So the first thing is, how do you get the brain to let go? Well, you put it through a process. And so after you do 20 minutes of walk, run, and you've already surrendered somewhere in that 20 minutes, especially if you did it. I did this for 5 years. We'd almost start every class. And I could catch my brain getting used to trying to do the brain thing. And then I'd have to yield, open up the back of my head, open up my peripheral big ears, and not look directly, but look peripheral vision, so that then we would go into exercises of ensemble. And these are the games that I wrote about in my book, because ensemble, you know, there are wonderful ensemble teachers out there, and there are some simple games everybody uses in the ensemble warm-ups. One of them is called What Are You Doing? This is a great game to play with. You can do it with one person, or you can do it with a group of kids, or you can do it in your family. But basically, if you're with one person, you face each other. One person starts some kind of gesture, like it looks like I'm brushing my teeth, right? So this person's doing the gesture, and this person says, "What are you doing?" And this person says, "I'm flying a kite." So you're doing something incongruent. Your gesture is this, but the words are saying flying a kite. So already things are a little out of kilter. And learning to be flexible when things are out of kilter is a good skill. That's the skill you're developing. So then this person says, "I'm flying a kite." So now this person who asked the question flies the kite. Now they're flying the kite. And this person says, "What are you doing?" And this person has to think creatively, what can I say that's not what I'm doing? Right? You have to come up with something quickly. "Oh, I'm walking the dog." Of course, you don't walk the dog in the air. So then the other person walks the dog, right? And this person goes, "What are you doing?" And the person goes, "Oh, I'm making a phone call to my mother." And right? So that's how it works, because it demands. Now this person sees this and it's like, no, a phone call is more like this. So then their brain goes, what? It's what I call healthy dissonance in the brain. You have to create some healthy dissonance, but not make it trauma. Now let me take a moment here and talk about that. Our brain loves coherence. So when someone's angry, their face needs to look angry,
Mm.
or at least, grounded and potent, or if they're
Mhm.
scared. But if someone is always saying, everything's fine, and they're really mad, your nervous system is going to go, something's wrong here.
Mm.
It's not congruent because our eyes are looking for congruence. They scan for danger. They're busy, even the part of the brain, it's called the little almond, the amygdala, is awake in utero. So that means it must be very important. It must be very important to be able to tell if the world is safe.
Yeah.
And that's why I go back with people and help them heal birth trauma, because sometimes they had a fine growing up life, but their birth did not feel safe. And so in school and in social situations, they go back to this defense posture they developed in a moment in time.
Mhm.
And that's where we want to rehab the brain. That's what I teach in my complex trauma, healing complex trauma course. You want to rehab and work with brain states. So that's what improvisation does. It's just not focused on trauma. It
Mm.
gets your brain to mess it up a little bit, to be incoherent, but then to have a playful interaction with that. So then
Mm.
what are you doing becomes a game. And if you have more than one person, you just, once you've had your turn, you run to the back of the line. And so it rotates through the people till your whole family has played the game. And that's a great thing for families because all of a sudden, mom and dad are playing.
Mhm.
Oh boy, you don't want to be the kid as a parent. You're not, you're the parent, but you want to be able to play. And so the kids like that. And so what are you doing is a simple, easy exercise you can start with. What it does in terms of the brain is it creates some incoherence, right? So it's got your attention. How many of you have kids who never can focus their attention, right? They get lost. So what play does is it gets your attention
Mhm.
and you have to engage with it, and it's creative. Now, another creative improv exercise is called stealing center stage. Maybe I don't want to talk about this one yet. Let me think about that. Stealing center stage is for those kids who are really shy. And it's for the kids who are always stealing center stage to get used to being pushed to the back. It's about balancing the ego. And so for what it is you have three people. Improv is a lot of scores. A score is just an instruction. So what are you doing is a score. That's where your gesture doesn't match what you say. And you go through the line. So stealing center stage is a score. And what that means is you have a little bit of an audience. So you can always create this in your family. You can have a one-person audience based on the size of your family. And then you have at least two people on stage. And maybe three is better, one of the parents on stage, yeah? And so the kids see you playing. And then it's called the three are doing their thing, they're on stage, whatever they're doing, moving around. So you say, okay, move around, just move around and make sure you have everybody's attention. You steal the center stage. So then people are getting in front of each other, they're kind of pushing each other back, they're trying to be really big over here on the side and get all the attention. And it's a fun game because you have to get creative. Like, oh, my behavior has an impact. How do I get the impact? And for the shy kids, I teach this in my 2-year trainings with grown-ups studying therapy. I mean, it's an important skill. And I had some people who were so shy that they don't actually step into the therapy seat sometimes. Because sometimes you have to confront your clients a little bit. You don't just want to empathize with them. You have to say, well, how's that working for you? Right? You want to help them dismantle protective response behaviors. especially if they were created in infancy or from a heartbreaking moment in life. You don't want to live your life in the past like that. And so learning the skill of stealing center stage. Now you have to make sure it doesn't get mean or competitive, but each time you do, and this is really good for family or even, office workers, to have dialogue or partners, then you have a debrief after the experience. So what play does is it's an interactive experience. How we learn from it is, if we're doing these scores, we can sit down with our family and say, wow, how did that feel to be in the center stage? Oh, was it scary? You can find out from your children. And if one guy or, girl was stealing it all the time, you could say, did you ever think somebody else wanted a turn? Or did you ever get tired of having to be in the center of attention all the time? That's good for kids to even get a chance to say. And I tell you, I work with families that sometimes they have adopted one child and it's two adults with one child. That's a lot of adult energy on a single child. Or if a couple has just one child. Those kids get a little too much adult energy. And it's not that great for them. Adults have to learn how to give them a little more breathing room space. But the problem is the kid will even get in between the parents because it wants to be centered, wants that attention. So the kid doesn't have any other kid to just be kids with. So the adults can have a break and adult things. So if you've got an only child, pay attention to this, figure it out, get a dog or help your kid have kid time. And in the home, don't get used to over talking with your child. This is what I see happen with the brains of kids from, if they're the only kid in the family, they're getting an adult conversation all the time. That's a lot. And often, they're getting way too many questions. This is another thing. I'm weaving play and parenting here. Play, many parents will ask their kids questions all the time. What do you want for dinner? Do you want to go to the store? Is it time to pick up your shoes? And they make it all a question. That puts the brain literally in a place where it's supposed to answer. And it thinks it has a choice. Now, that's not right. If you're going to the store and your kids are coming with you, you don't ask them if they want to go. That's not fair. You say, we're going to the store. Be ready in 5 minutes. And then if they give you a big fuss and fight, you use 1, 2, 3 magic. And you redirect the fuss and fight, because the fuss and fight will happen, but you redirect it sometimes by interrupting what they call the stop behavior. You don't want every direction you give your kid to be an argument. That's exhausting to a parent. Every direction I give, it's a fight. When I hear that, I listen for birth trauma. Oh, was your kid born C-section? Oh, did they have vacuum suction or forceps? Was the cord wrapped around their neck? Because a birth can be a power struggle. And you want to dismantle that shock or fear in the body, in the infant body that is now your child, that is now playing out the power struggle with you. And you don't want to live your life in a power struggle. And so that's why sometimes you need to set limits that have consequences, and you make the consequences age appropriate. Often a kid, you'll say, oh, what should your consequence be? They'll make it huge. I should miss supper for a week. Come on now, we're not going to do that, right? You have to make age appropriate consequence. But you're helping children learn that their behavior has an impact and it has consequences on others. So then it's not just all about me, right? That's part of parenting, is socializing and sharing the attention. So center stage is a great way to explore the question of how do we share attention? And then in an ensemble, you've got, 5 people on stage and they're all sharing the attention. And I love improvisation because it may have a rough score, like, okay, we're going to have 3 people over here halfway through, or 2 people are going to walk along the diagonal, but it doesn't tell you when. It doesn't control the analytics so that there's some spontaneity. And if every ensemble member is holding the score, they know that they get to see what's happening and respond. They don't have to make it happen, because you'll see people who are doing improvisation and the ones on the stage trying to make it all happen all the time, they get kind of boring. You don't want to watch them. You're like, give the other person a turn, right? Relax. Let's see what happens. And that's it. The ability to be in the field and let the field actually have creativity. How does a family field know it gets to be creative? And we listen to all members of the family in our creative endeavor. Now, if you're a parent, and of course you have different age kids, how do you teach the older kids to let the younger kids have their creative moment? Right? And my youngest brother would always say, no, he'd like almost have a fit. Let me talk. Because at the dinner table, everybody's talking, but he's youngest, and the conversation will go on at its level and he's left behind. So we teach the skills of improvisation so that you're not impatient to get your voice heard. You're like, oh, what's he got to contribute? How is our family an ensemble of intelligence? Now, wouldn't that be fun if families thought of it that way and parents thought of it that way? And the parents were the directors. They weren't going to become the ensemble member and then they're competitive with their own kids, or they want their kid to like them so much they don't give their child limits. That's not good, because then you end up bribing your kid, or you end up, not giving them a limit and then blowing up at them, or you end up overburdened and exhausted. And all of this is about learning how to play. That's the fun thing. Play is improvisational movement. So you get your body in motion. You can see the purple book behind me. I teach contact improvisation. And it's a skill set of listening to the body and having the body do things you're not used to doing. That's what are you doing does. It has the body do something opposite than what you think it's saying. And that's good, because you want to mix up those pathways so that you have an improvisational creative brain that can still set limits. This is important because in improvisation, the improvisation I like to see is a communion with the audience, that you're always responding to the audience. So in my one-woman shows, I'm often asking the audience a question or having them do something, because we're creating interaction. And that's what good therapy is. It's actually interactive, because your body as a therapist is a barometer for what's happening for your client. Doesn't mean you merge and fuse with them, but if I notice a client is talking and talking and I'm starting to get antsy, I'm going to call a pause. And I'm going to find out what's underneath those words. Or if the person's even in their own body, they may be in their trauma loop and their body's in a freeze response. So then I might get up and have them push against the wall, get some feedback into the body. My other book, this green one, is called Help for Sensory Challenges. I wrote that to help kids get back in their bodies. Because if they've had a difficult birth, or if the parents don't know how to be in their bodies, then the parents are always bringing the kid into their head. And then kids with structured sports have much less time to do creative dig in the dirt. Very early on, the creativity becomes a structured sport for movement.
Mm.
We want there to be embodied. So this green book is full of games that are touch and tactile and weight bearing. And literally that changes up the perceptions. Our perceptions are what get cultivated and what make us good at play. If our perceptions are available and not locked into our own view, when we lock into our own opinion, we actually aren't taking in new information. If we're seeing the world through the filters of our past protective responses, we're not present time. And so one way is to do therapy and get to the bottom of the story and get the body to regroup. And I would say another way is to learn how to play. If you can play, I do clowning with therapists. Sometimes I have them make their problem into the poor me clown, because then they start to see if they're on the power triangle. If they're, and this is in my ebook about power struggles, because I see it so often. Like one client who had a forceps birth that was so much pressure that her head was so bruised, they didn't show her to her parents for 4 days. Now that's severe, but every session she would butt heads with me. Maybe it saved her life, or maybe it was because her mom was on her back and couldn't move her hip joints. She wasn't allowed to be on all fours and move, or she had anesthesia and couldn't move her body at all. Because the pelvis is meant to move those big joints as the baby's head turns, because the baby has to rotate to get out. So if that rotation ability is interrupted, more babies get stuck. And so then a lot of interventions with chemicals happen, all the way to a C-section. Now, don't get me wrong, it's good to have live babies. But if we can help the education of obstetricians and help mamas move as much as they're able to, and to pace it so that there's not a pressure to have the baby now, but there is a limit, right? If the baby's not coming out soon enough and there's danger of infection, well, then maybe it's time for induction. Or maybe it's time, but then how do you repair the trauma for the infant and the mother after the birth? Early intervention for any difficult birth makes a world of difference in the brain of that infant. I've had a 6-week-old be able to tell the story. Now, how could I help a 6-week-old tell a story of their birth? Because I know how to play. I could ask questions and I could know the infant is responding. And so we had a mama and dad come in with their little 6-week-old, and the father brought them in. He said, my baby doesn't really let my mom bond with her. And this man was a student in my, I used to be the director at Naropa of the body psychotherapy for the masters in somatic psychology. And he was in my program, and he saw me working with babies, because I would bring babies in to teach us. And he said, my baby isn't settling into mama. And I thought, oh, okay, let's see. And he said it was a C-section. So we get the family together and we slow everything down. And I'm watching, you always watch first. And I'm observing that the baby's not there with the mama. So I'm trying in my playful way, I want to get the baby to participate in telling me what happened, as well as be able to hear the mother and the dad. So when I work with behavior, I always ask the question, what's the hidden story underneath behavior? It doesn't mean you condone the behavior. My master's program was in applied behavioral science. We pay attention to behavior, but we don't condemn it without also working at what's the hidden story, and can we help the somatic nervous system come back into balance? So someone isn't in a freeze response or a defense or even not using their eyes. A lot of people don't even look out of their eyes under stress. They don't see, even if they're looking. So with this little 6-week-old baby, I asked the mother, to start telling me about the birth story. And I saw the baby start to get agitated. When I watched the baby's expression, I thought, oh my gosh, you're mad, little baby. And so I asked the mother, I said, I think your baby's mad at you because you went away during the C-section. Wasn't your fault, but you went away. And she goes, I did. I was so scared when I heard C-section that I totally checked out. And I said, okay, then, and that's normal, right? Nobody wants that. And then I suggested, well, why don't you tell your baby that you're sorry you went away and that you're back? And the mother, because I had to help the mother not go into guilt.
Yeah.
Mothers will blame themselves. It's not their fault. But what repaired the relationship, and this is what good parenting is the ability to repair. You don't have to be the perfect parent, but you have to know how to repair with children, not go belly up and poor me and I'm so sorry. No. You have to have some potency. So with this mother, I said, okay, well then don't go into guilt. Can you feel how if you go into guilt, the baby can't find you? They don't feel you. And she's already mad that you went away. So she needs to feel you. So then the mother did a beautiful job. She said, honey, I was so scared about the C-section that I went away. But I am back now and I'm here for you and I'm going to be here for you. And the baby went, oh, yeah. So the baby stopped being mad. Now the baby could be sad. It couldn't feel its sadness because it was busy mad. And so now the baby just started going, oh, mama's back and I'm so sad. And then the mother saw that and she goes, oh, honey, I'm so sorry we lost each other. I was so sad too. Now they are becoming coherent with each other. The mother knows what the baby went through from the baby's perspective as well. Then the baby got terrified. So the baby couldn't feel its fear because it was mad, and it couldn't feel its sadness. So once it got sad and it could feel the safety of mom understanding it, it went into panic and flailing. And I used some touch on the baby's legs. I always work the ankle joints, especially after a C-section, because there could be a freeze response that the baby, if you think about it, this is what I think happens, because babies don't use English, but they use the body. I worked with babies in Switzerland. They can share their stories and they can understand English if you, with your body, help them know what you're talking about. I have babies where I talked in English, but the baby totally unwound its story when I worked with a psychiatrist in Switzerland. So here, what the baby did is I was using touch. Now that's why the first platform foundation of safety in the body is the ability to feel weight and pressure. And that's what a C-section doesn't have. The baby doesn't squish and go through the birth canal. So the baby, if you think about play, the only reason I'm able to hear this baby's story is I'm improvising. I don't know what's going to happen in that session, but I do know there's a need for this baby to rest into their mama's chest. That's a lifelong repair that will affect them for a lifetime. That the baby can settle and trust the mama. Yeah. So I have to know how to improvise to be able to follow the story. Otherwise, I'm just being the authority telling them about themselves. That does not work. No, you have to be with the baby, with the mama, with the dad, with the space in the room. It's like that's your improvisational space. That's what good therapy is.
Wow.
Because the body is showing you what to do. The emotions are showing you their protective response behaviors. The difficult behavior is showing you headbutting with this client, picking a fight every session. She's trying to tell me about how much the forceps hurt her head. But if I couldn't improvise, I would have got mad. Like I didn't like having someone pick a fight with me every session. But I could redirect the energy and say, wow, I wonder how your head is feeling. And it took a lot for her to actually, this adult I mentioned earlier, feel the pain in her skull that was residual there. We have residual ability to bring up nicotine smells, to bring up anesthesia. It's residual cellular imprint that can come to the surface, release, and that's when it gets uncomfortable. But if you stay with the discomfort instead of trying to control it or make it go away or fix it, but you give the safety of, that's your shock telling the story. Don't worry. Just let it tell the story. Don't go away because it needs you to be there. You're the secure adult rebonding with your own infant stories. And you're not letting them be an excuse for bad behavior or an excuse for not getting functional in your life. You're just letting the story become integrated as a moment in time. And that's what I wanted for this mother and infant, was that the C-section was a moment in time, not a forever held in the baby's nervous system or the parent's nervous system. But an adult has a much different way to engage with information than an infant. And this is key if you're working with others. When the shock is in the infant brain, it will go into globalized internal sensation. It will go into existential view, like this is how the world is, not that this was a moment in time. And that's why if you're treating shock and trauma, take my courses, because few people do this. They don't know how to hold the field with enough containment and guidance and limit so that the story can actually come to the surface. And it's the participation with the emotional recalibration, and literally that's chemicals processing that were stored in the body. The recalibration changes the brain. So we're working with brain states, and this little infant was in a brain state that had her not trusting her mama. So once she could be mad and the mom showed up and didn't go guilty, but didn't go, oh, well, it's nothing, right? Mom had to feel it. Then they could, oh, they found each other in their grief. Oh, we missed each other. Oh, it was so precious. The heart can feel it when people really connect. And then the mother saw the baby's fear. And that helped fear be allowed in the room. And nobody was becoming afraid and freezing. We were meeting the fear and saying, wow, were you scared about the C-section? Yes, I was. Mama had fear. Baby is afraid. And, you know, a C-section, we need necessary C-sections. Don't get me wrong. We don't need not unnecessary C-sections. And the doctors who can actually talk to the baby and tell them what they're going to do. I saw this on a video from a Duke obstetrician. This woman stopped, took a moment before they went into the surgery and told the baby what was going to happen. And she said, hello, honey, I know you're in there and you have to come out a different way. And I'm going to need your help. So what's this brilliant doctor doing? She's making the birth relational. So she is not the alien trying to pull the baby away from the mother. But she says to this baby, you're going to feel me cut your mama and I have to pull her skin open. That's what happens. Now they do pulling instead of a slice because the irregular skin repairs better than if it was just a slice. So they have to pull. And then she said, and it's going to be very fast. You're going to feel all this water and it's going to, it has to get out of the way. And I need to find your head. Can you help me find your head? So you're going to feel me tear your mama's tummy open, her womb open. And then I'm going to come in and I'm going to find your head and I'm going to lift you up. Now, think about how shocking that is for an infant who doesn't know what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody's got goggles on, they've got a hat on, they've got gloves. A baby doesn't know any of that. Plus, the mom's body went numb. So the baby can't feel the mother moving, and play is movement.
Mm-hmm.
So the doctor tells them that, and then they do the surgery, and now they're even putting the babies on the mama's chest. So it's times are changing. So don't get me wrong, but to finish this story, once the baby could express its fear and the mother felt her fear and they could realize they survived, oh, that moment in time is over. The baby just totally rested into the mom's heart.
Mm.
It was so beautiful. And the dad was like, oh, thank goodness. Now, I could not have done that if I didn't know how to play. I could not have tracked the movement of the baby and the movement of the mother and the movement of the father. Because that's what you do when you're in an ensemble improvising. You're aware of the field. And I'm letting what people say, I'm watching what their body's saying. 75% of communication is the body. And sometimes the body is not saying, the body hasn't grown over the past trauma. It's still holding on to it. Sometimes the mental body's holding on to it. Sometimes the emotional body, the emotional body's holding on to it, or the mental body's holding on to it. So you want to play in all those realms. And as a parent, the more you can enjoy interacting with your kids, even when you're setting limits, and you can be able, if you have a good limit setting in place that you're not always exhausted by your kids, then you can enjoy all the magic they bring you. There's so much magic because they're exploring the world again. And as a grown-up, you get to see that through a child's eyes. You get to feel them run and jump in your arms. Oh, I love you, right? It's so spontaneous. Or be so curious about the bug on the leaf and how our caterpillar's made, right? The joy of parenting comes back with play. And the joy of being a therapist happens with play. Otherwise, you get worn out hearing people's disrupted lives. It's exhausting, and they don't get better. They don't graduate. I want clients to graduate, which means they know how to have a good enough life, no matter what happened. Now, some people need a little more resources because some really bad things happened, but you can build those in, and you do it through the somatic psychotherapy. You understand primitive reflexes. You understand tactile, weight and pressure, auditory startle. That the eyes have to rest on the ears or mouthing. You help people go back and crawl. I have a book called Conception to Crawling. It's why the crawling patterns open the brain. And if you go back you understand the developmental arc, you understand the perceptions and the primitive reflexes, and you understand movement, intervention, then you're giving new information to the brain. And that's what play is. So the last thing I'll say, this has lots of other scores that you can use. Playback theater. Playback theater is an ensemble, but what I love about it is its audience participation and its true stories. So playback theater is set up in the way that you have an audience and a director and actors. And the actors can often come from the audience once you've trained people how to do this or you model it. And what it is it's a method of telling real life stories, not through talk, 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 but through the story being played back in a short format. So the actors have to feel the emotions. They have to improvise right in the moment, and nobody's telling them what to do. So they know that this story will come alive. They have to respond to the other actors. And what's so fascinating is the intelligence of the field tells the story. There's skill sets. So I give all the skill sets, and the second half of the book is all about playback theater skills. And I got interested in that. This is my little social activism. After the murders in the Columbine High School, I went and volunteered. It was the first tragic killing student by student. And I went and volunteered with the students there. And I realized pretty soon that this is a field, this is a group thing that needs help. So I did a pilot study of playback theater in the public schools in a school in Longmont, ironically called Old Columbine. And I worked with the students who couldn't make it in regular classrooms. Either they'd moved around all the time, they didn't know how to bond, they'd been disrupted. And so often these were the kids who were trying, they didn't know how to drop into a learning environment. And so I wanted to do playback theater and see if they could bond and care about each other. Because students who care about each other are not going to kill them. A lot of it is about get rid of the guns, okay, but also students who care and we can hear their stories. So if a student is suffering and nobody knows it, that student is not going to be, that's a cry for help. And so what playback theater does is it gets the stories in the field. And the students start to understand, I'm not alone. I'm not the only one this happens to. Oh, and you're listening to someone's story. You don't have to be one-on-one with them. That can be too personal for a teenager or a kid. But the story gets told. So an example of a story could be, I went to the grocery store. My dog was in my truck and he jumped out of the truck and got killed. In the parking lot, a kid could tell that story. My dad took us to the store with my dog in the back. That story has meaning and heart. And in playback theater, you would show that story, beginning, middle, end. Or it could be a story about bullies. It could be a story about a friend who all of a sudden they stop being my friend. These are the real social questions. And once these stories start to get told, what I found in my 6-month pilot study is these kids started bonding. And at first their stories was all about getting wasted and putting other people down. But I started putting in some of my personal stories that they acted out, and they started to drop the facade and tell the real stories. And in the real stories, you feel the emotion, you feel the empathy. Sometimes they're funny, they're not all about pain, but I don't really want playback theater to be funny, ha, ha, ha. Because we have a lot to uncover and share. One person, I remember when I was in training for playback theater, one guy had back surgery. And so we didn't know what was going to happen, but the director says, pick someone to be you. That's what they tell the actors. First, they bring the storyteller up on stage and they sit next to them and they say, oh, what's your story? And of course, the person telling it is going to go on and on and on. Can you stay, Elise? I'm a little over time, but are you good? Okay. So the director has to gracefully interrupt the storyteller a lot to get just the score of the story, just a little bit. And the actors have to really tune in. And my book tells you how to warm up your actors, especially if you're using people from the audience, how to be a director so that you know how to gracefully interrupt, and to how to get a story to have a beginning, middle, and end. because that's what makes it work. If it goes on and on and on, it doesn't work. If it doesn't go anywhere and is all ha ha ha, that doesn't work either. But if the humor comes out of a story that's real, that's great. So then the director will say the first thing, once you get just a little, how does this story start? You might ask that question. And then you'll say, pick someone of the actors to be you. So the story's already coming alive. What are 3 words to describe you in this story? So you can't have someone tell a story unless they're in it. So they can't be a made up story. But they get themselves in the story. And then you say, who else is in the story? And then all of a sudden the story's coming alive even more. Oh, there's a dog. Oh, there was a big thunderstorm. Oh, so the actors, one of them, nobody tells the actor, once they're given the storyteller picks the actors, but maybe they only pick 2 actors and there's 5. The other actors figure out what to be. Like maybe one of them is the thunderstorm and they grab a sheet. The only props are little scarves or fabrics. You don't have a big set. Maybe you have a box that you can stand on and get off. Maybe. But that's it. So it's very easy. It's a low cost, easy thing to travel with if you're going from school to school. And my dream is that college interns will get trained in playback theater as an internship program, and you'll mix theater students and psychology students as a team, and they will go to public schools and train the high school students, do playback in the high school. Then they'll mentor, these college students will mentor the high school students to go to the middle schools. And maybe you can even mentor the middle school students to go to the elementary school. So it's a trickle down service learning curriculum. Now, sometimes the only way a school has time for that is in an after school program or a program where the students don't fit in the regular classroom. I was allowed in my pilot study to have, I think I had a half hour a day or a half hour every 3 days. So we got to, for 6 months, and we got to build the skills. And the teacher said there was so much cooperation in that classroom, when at the beginning, it was just all people positioning for power. And so my hope is, that's my gift to the parents of students who are in public schools and you're afraid for your students, your kids, really, because of this uncontrollable thing going on, is if we can bring care, quality care of student to student, we're going to see less of that. So that's my wish, my prayer, my hope. And if you join me, I'm having you'll get this book for free as an ebook, and I will be able to work with you personally to find out more about play. My online course is called 3 Days of Play, and I'll do demo sessions with people in it. You'll get the book for free, and it's happening next week, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, in the middle of the day. So if you get a chance to join me, go to my website and sign up. It's called 3 Days of Play Live with Annie Brooke, and share anything from this seminar that was useful to you, anything that provoked some good thinking. Sign up for my free PDF library or follow me on Instagram. I do free Friday Facebook Lives, which are all geeky somatic tips, because I feel the more embodied we are, and that means head, heart, gut, and spirit, the more relational we are. And when we can live in quality relationships, we can shine our soul through to our life, to our families, to our beloveds. So thank you so much for being here. Yeah, pleasure to be with you. I'm going to extend a little bit here if you have any questions or comments.
Oh my God, so much. But thank you so much. That was absolutely amazing. I am beyond excited to just hear everything you're talking about. And I wish I could just share so much more of where I'm coming from, because it's just, Anyway, so I have a question that relates just specifically to, some of the things you were speaking about in the beginning regarding children. How would the work that you're doing be sort of tailored to a child with ADD?
Good question, because sometimes those children get exhausted and they exhaust their parents.
Yeah.
And ADD for play, I would work especially with the kid with containment.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I forgot to say in the seminar is play is about props for kids. I have all kinds of little props in my office. Like here, if a kid is low tone, I talk about the floppy monkey.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a push against the wall a little bit so they can feel like, oh, they have some strength.
Mm-hmm.
I want them to externalize so they can understand. So a kid who's ADHD can often have had something that causes, this is my own theory, studying neuroscience and movement science. I always wonder if kids who have ADHD have a freeze response. And I have to backtrack and give you a little tiny neuroanatomy lesson. Is that okay?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So sensation, right? One of our perceptual skills of telling us what's happening in the world and what happens to our bodies. So sensing comes in to the central, it comes in through our peripheral nerves, and then it organizes in the central spine into nerve roots. It's like two little roots going out from the belly of the spine, from the sides of the vertebra. The back root is sensory. So the sensory is gathering in. The front root is motor. And so sensing goes through, primitive reflex just goes right across. There's no deliberation. Sense and motor, sense and motor. And what caused me to think about if there's a freeze response for these kids is that in non-reflexive movement, sensation goes up to the brain to process. And if there's a freeze response, that kid isn't going to have the processing capacity. They're going to sense and motor, sense and motor, sense and motor. So they don't know how to contain. So I might work with proprioception to give them weight and pressure. Like I play games I call squishy bug, and I'll teach parents how to fold that kid into a baby ball on their lap and hold their feet and let the kid feel themselves pushing out. Like, oh, and you don't want to hold them tight like they're in prison, but you want to hold them so they can feel their own body. And ideally, you hold their feet and they feel their legs, maybe. Oh, I didn't know I had legs. I'm going so fast, I can't ever feel my feet. Right? So you go back into perception. And then you organize containment. So I have big old hula hoops, like real big ones in my office against the wall, and we'll pull them out. And with a kid who's ADHD, sometimes I'll have them stand in one spot, which is really hard to do. And I'll take the hula hoop, I'll say, okay, stand there, but tell me if you feel different. And I take my hula hoop and I gather up the field in a way, and I gently bring it down over them and I put it on the floor. And I say, do you feel anything? Because I want them to know they have sort of an energetic body. And so I work a lot with containment. And then sometimes I have to work with the parents because the parents have their own shock and trauma, and it activates the kids. And so it's a whole dynamic. But ADHD, what I think happens is the communication through the nerves, the sensory nerves there's a little nerve inside the spine called internuncial. It's the bridge between sensory and motor. So my thinking goes like this. If there's a freeze response, that's not going to communicate. Or if it does go up to the brain, it might go into the trauma loop, still held in the amygdala and the basal ganglia and the brain parts that hijack us emotionally. So the sensing doesn't come into creative choice making, which is what play is. When you're improvising, there's hundreds of choices passing through, and you learn how to pick one and stay relational. I don't think ADHD stays relational with themselves, their own body, and I think they have trouble staying relational in the field.
Wow.
So I think you can use play to help those children come out of a freeze response. You can use props. I always use props to tell the birth story. And if there was somebody who was dangerous, and it's become, we throw that bad guy out of the room, because some people don't know protection. And the kids, when I throw that bad guy out of the room, they love it. In my yellow books, it has volume 2, has all the treatment tools I use with kids. And if someone has never known protection, they only know activation. They don't know that they can relax in a hula hoop. And sometimes I'll put a hula hoop around a parent and around a kid. I'll have them both sit there and see what that feels like. Or with couples, I'll have them each have a hula hoop and see what it's like, because the house has to breathe. Yeah. And so that would be my answer for that. Does that helpful?
Yeah. That's, so interesting. And I guess, so my last question is just more, this is a workshop that goes on for 3 days in about a week. Right. Okay.
Sunday, Monday, Tuesday next week.
Sunday, Monday, Tuesday next week.
Yeah.
May I ask you how much it is?
It's $197.
Okay.
And you can, and that includes the book.
Yeah.
Yep.
You ship to Europe? I'm in Sweden.
You're in Sweden. I send the ebook. I'll send you the ebook.
Okay, cool. I am Swedish, but I would be paying you in Canadian dollars because I'm a Canadian as well. I used to live in Canada for 10 years, although I'm from Sweden, and I moved back to Sweden just about a year ago. But then I still have my finances over there.
Okay, we can make all that work. If you want to be in the course, or even if you need a payment plan, we can do that.
I'm so beyond excited to everything you've talked about, and wow. And I have so much I want to tell you, but that's not for the webinar. But yeah, I'm super excited, and I'm going to show up.
Good. And if you have any friends who want to show up, especially who live in your area, then they'll understand how you can practice some of these things together or apply them. Yeah. So I'd love to share that with you, and I look forward to, you can go to anniebrook.com to sign up.
Okay.
Or my Instagram will have the bio link in there for the course. And you can just sign up. If you have any trouble, just email me at outreach@anniebrook.com, because I know there was a little trouble with the link for this webinar.
Yes.
Yeah. And I will get that sorted out and help you. I'd love to share with you. Thank you so much for being here.
That's so cool. I'm so, yeah, this was such a, I'm actually working with, you probably know the book, Artist's Way.
Yes, yes.
At the moment, and we're kind of working on it.
Good.
Like our way through. Yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah, we need that creative spirit.
Yeah. The thing that doesn't have is the whole kind of trauma perspective, right? Which is so fascinating and so interesting.
Yeah.
Of course, in the summer on it. So I'm a little familiar with the words and but yeah. So okay, so excited.